You're watching Coping with COVID-19 with Chris Manners. Today's special guest is Dr. Stephen Zlutnick.
Hi, I'm Chris Manners, and you're watching Coping with COVID-19. Today my guest is Dr. Stephen Zlutnick. He's the director of the Behavior Therapy Center of San Francisco and Professor Emeritus in Counseling Psychology at the University of San Francisco. Dr. Zlutnick, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's talk about managing anxieties during this pandemic. What types of issues are people facing at the moment?
Yeah, well, there's a number of issues, and I really want to point out that this is affecting everyone. This has come on very quickly, so it's normal. If you're not experiencing some anxiety, something's a touch off, because this affects us all. I think some of the main ones, of course, is our health, and worried about getting the virus and or developing serious complications. I think for a lot of people who are single, living alone, in isolation, has been very difficult. I think being in close quarters with people who we normally have some space from, now we're together 24/7. That's produced a lot of stress and anxiety. That loss of connection with others, we've already addressed, and having kids home for a lot of people.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So what other problems might occur if you're spending more time at home with family members?
Well, first of all, every family has a dynamic, and I think whatever that dynamic is, the good things are not a problem. It's the difficulties we have. And when you're suddenly together 24/7, again, it's like hooking everything up to an amplifier.
So what kind of problems could be created by working from home, perhaps for the very first time in your career?
A lot of people are not used to working at home, and working at home just isn't the same. For one thing, there's a lack of social interaction. Some people find that affects them greatly. Some people are actually finding they're getting more work done at home without distractions from work. The lack of structure is probably the most common one we see. At work, you're in the office, people are kind of watching. We know what our schedule is. Suddenly you're at home, you're on your own.
Absolutely. So now, if those are some of the issues people are facing, what are some of the techniques people can use to overcome their anxiety?
I think there are many. One of the first is how managing and keeping track of your thinking. We think and talk to ourselves a lot. That's normal. But we have a dialogue with ourselves often, and we need to monitor that a bit. People tend to ruminate versus problem solve. That is, they tend to worry about all the things that might go wrong. And what I'd suggest is, look, there are things that can go wrong, but ruminating about the worst case scenario is not going to be very productive. Sit down, figure out what the things are that you have to deal with, and try to problem solve. If you just catch yourself ruminating repeatedly, that's going to be a problem. I think any of the self-control techniques for anxiety can be helpful, and there are dozens of them. The common ones are meditation, relaxation techniques, yoga, for example, and another is diaphragmatic breathing. If you Google that, just to throw that out to the viewers, you can learn diaphragmatic breathing in about 10 minutes online. It's incredibly simple, and it's a really nice way to reduce anxiety in the moment. So self-control procedures, exercise, whether if you're fortunate enough to have equipment at home, that's great. If you're not, get outside, go for a walk. Keep your safe distance, of course, but you need to be moving, need to be active. That's helpful.
So I think people may be dealing with information overload at the moment. How would you suggest people manage that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I think it's really important to kind of limit the information you get. Not in terms of accuracy. I think in terms of accuracy, you want to identify a few sites where people are coming with evidence-based information and scientific information so you can inform yourself well. Once you've informed yourself, you need to not be watching all day long. I've talked to people who are kind of mesmerized in front of the TV, and it just keeps that anxiety going. So you need to limit your viewing for sure.
So depression and stress can be issues for people who particularly have economic concerns, are worried about their family and friends and loved ones, or who are essential workers. What would you suggest they do to help manage anxiety and stress?
Well, I think there's a number of things. One of the major ones for depression is called behavioral activation. Put simply, it really means that people who tend to not be depressed have a number of reinforcing activities to engage in, whether it's hobbies, you read, you listen to music, you crochet, you whatever, woodworking. Those kinds of things are very important. And so you want to make sure that you're engaging in activities that literally make you feel better, as opposed to sitting around ruminating, worrying about all the worst case scenarios that might happen.
Would you say this is a good time to try and do some self-development?
Yes, it's a very interesting time. And I've talked to a couple of my own clients who are finding in a very positive way that this isolation, while at first can generate a lot of anxiety, particularly if you're just not good at living alone, for a number of people, it's giving them a chance to kind of sit back and really think about what's important in their lives. What are the priorities? I think that maybe if there's any silver lining in this epidemic, it's really forcing all of us to kind of rethink what's really important.
Indeed. Though at the same time, there are people who are feeling very lonely at home. How would you encourage them to overcome that?
If you can get online, FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, like we're doing right now, you can stay connected. It's very possible. Those connections are important. We're social critters, and we need that connection. I think for people who don't have those options, pull out photos, take a look at pictures of family. You need to stay connected, and it's very important.
And finally, do you have any suggestions that are specifically for families?
Yes. Well, again, I think one of the interesting things that's come about from all this, as I talk to families on video, is they're obviously spending more time together. While it's a bit awkward, particularly for parents who are out of the house working a lot, it's a chance to really deepen relationships, spend more good quality time together. I think parents really need to step back and kind of plan a day a little bit, not micromanage it, but have some ideas as to can the family play games together. A lot of people I've talked to, they're eating together as a family for the first time. So I think there are a number of things people can do. One other is I think it's useful sometimes at the end of the day for the family just take 5-10 minutes and say, how did the day go? What are we running into? I just talked to someone on the phone before we started who said at the end they've noticed what time of day all their anxiety kind of comes together and they start sniping at each other. So now they're taking a few minutes at the end of the day to say, okay, how are we doing? A little check-in.
I mean, I think maybe modeling good behavior is something you could do within your family too, to try and improve.
It's critical. And I think that's relevant, very relevant to how children are going to do. Most of the research from crises, particularly things we can't control, showed that children do as well as their parents do. So I think it's important for parents to think about how they're reacting. Can they stay calm? Because whatever they do is modeling coping for their children. So that can be very useful. It can also be problematic.
When we talked earlier, you also mentioned that acknowledging that your kids are afraid is important.
Yes. I think that ties to your last question. I think modeling staying calm, for example, it's not incompatible with saying, Yeah, mom or dad is a little nervous too. There's a lot of stuff going on, but we're going to be okay. We're going to stay together. We've got our time together. We're going to be safe. We're going to fill in the blank. So you can do both. You can reassure, but also in a realistic way that lets the kids know that it's normal to be anxious in these times.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Dr. Zlutnick. I really appreciate the time you've given us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this episode. We'll be back with more COVID-19 related information shortly. You've been watching Coping with COVID-19. I'm Chris Manners. Thanks for watching.